Portugal does not have a talent problem. If anything, they have too much of it, but that has never been the real question. The real question is whether this team is ready to let go of the identity that made them. Because for nearly 2 decades, Portugal was not just a national team. It was Cristiano Ronaldo's team, and now, heading toward 2026, they are standing in a very uncomfortable place. Not fully in the past, not fully in the future, somewhere in between, and that is where tournament football becomes dangerous. Because World Cups are not won by potential. They are won by clarity, and right now Portugal is still searching for it. For years, Portugal's identity was simple: structured defense, controlled build-up, and one decisive moment. That moment almost always belonged to Cristiano Ronaldo. He was not just a striker, he was the final answer to every attacking question. When the system slowed down, he finished it. When the game became chaotic, he imposed order through goals. When the pressure rose, he absorbed it. Portugal did not need to solve every tactical problem because they had a player who could bypass them, but that solution comes with a long shadow, because once that era begins to fade, the system underneath is exposed. And that is exactly where Portugal finds itself now. Cristiano Ronaldo still exists in this team. That matters, but his role is no longer the same. And more importantly, the team around him is no longer built in the same way. This is not the Portugal of 2016. This is a different generation, a different rhythm, a different set of strengths. And that creates a new kind of tension, because transition is not just about replacing a player. It is about redefining the entire logic of how the team plays. Portugal now has creators: Bruno Fernandes, Bernardo, Silva, players who do not just finish attacks, but build them. This changes everything, because instead of waiting for a final moment, Portugal can now control phases of the game. They can circulate the ball, they can manipulate space, they can dictate tempo. But here's where things get complicated. Control requires structure, and structure requires sacrifice. Not every star fits naturally into that system. This is why the transition is not clean, because the old system was built around certainty, and the new one is built around interaction. Movement, positioning, spacing, timing, these are not individual qualities. They are collective behaviors, and collective behaviors take time. Sometimes more time than a tournament allows. Then there is Rafael Leão, and this is where the story becomes even more interesting, because Leão represents something Portugal did not always have: unpredictability, directness, chaos in the best possible sense. He is not there to control the game, he is there to break it open. And that creates a different kind of problem, because chaos does not always fit inside structure. So now Portugal faces a layered question: not just who replaces Ronaldo, but what kind of team do they want to be? A controlled possession-based side, a transition-heavy attacking team, or a hybrid that tries to do both? Each option has consequences, and each option changes the role of every key player. Cristiano Ronaldo still offers presence in the box. That instinct does not disappear, that timing, that ability to find space, that composure in front of goal. It is still there, but the game around him is moving faster. Pressing is more aggressive, transitions are more intense. Build-up is more structured, and that raises a difficult question. Can Portugal evolve while still carrying the legacy that defined them? Because this is the part people often misunderstand. Transition is not about disrespecting the past. It is about surviving the future, and Portugal is trying to do both at the same time, which sounds ideal, but in tournament football it is incredibly difficult. The next phase of this story is not about names. It is about roles, and how those roles either connect or collide. Because the pieces are there, the question is whether they form a system, or just a collection of possibilities. Portugal's story in international football has never been about dominance. It has always been about timing, moments, not eras, and that is what made 2016 so significant. Because that tournament was not built on overwhelming control or attacking brilliance. It was built on resilience, Portugal did not win that European championship by playing perfect football. They won it by surviving, by staying in games, by managing pressure, by finding one moment when it mattered most. And even in that tournament, the identity was clear. Cristiano Ronaldo was still the emotional and tactical center. Even when he left the final early, the structure of the team remained shaped by his presence. Everything revolved around that focal point. But after that victory, expectations changed. Portugal was no longer an underdog story. They became a team that people expected to compete consistently. And that is a different kind of pressure, because sustaining success requires more than moments. It requires systems. At the 2018 World Cup, Portugal showed flashes of both. There was still that reliance on individual brilliance, but there were also signs of a team trying to evolve. The problem was the evolution was incomplete, and in tournament football, incomplete ideas are exposed quickly. By the time Euro 2020 arrived, the squad looked stronger on paper. More depth, more creativity, more technical quality, but the same question remained: how do all these pieces fit together? Portugal were no longer limited by talent, they were limited by clarity. And that brings us closer to the present, because the journey to 2026 is not just about qualification. It is about transformation. According to official competition records, Portugal has remained one of Europe's most consistent qualifiers in recent cycles. But consistency in qualification does not always translate into dominance in tournaments. Those are two very different challenges. Qualifying campaigns allow time to adjust, time to experiment, time to recover from mistakes. World Cups do not. Every weakness is magnified. Every imbalance becomes visible. And this is where Portugal's current evolution becomes critical, because the squad now has something previous generations did not always have. Depth across multiple positions. Bruno Fernandes bringing vertical creativity, Bernardo Silva offering control and intelligence between lines, Rúben anchoring the defense with structure and communication, Rafael Leão providing raw, unpredictable attacking threat, and players like João Félix and Gonçalo Ramos adding different attacking profiles. On paper, this looks like a complete team, but football is not played on paper. It is played in moments of decision, and those decisions depend on structure. This is where the road to 2026 becomes more than just results. It becomes a process of defining identity, because Portugal can no longer rely on a single focal point. They need a system that connects multiple strengths, but here's where things get complicated again, because building a system means making choices. And choices mean trade-offs. If you prioritize control, you might lose directness. If you prioritize transition, you might lose stability. If you try to do both, you risk doing neither effectively. This is the dilemma Portugal faces. They are not lacking solutions. They are facing too many of them. And in international football, too many options can be as dangerous as too few, because clarity wins tournaments, not potential. So as Portugal moves closer to 2026, the question is not whether they have enough quality. They do. The question is whether that quality can be organized into something coherent, something repeatable, something that works under pressure, because this is the part people often overlook. Tournament football is not about playing your best game. It is about surviving your worst one. Portugal's history proves they can survive. But survival alone may not be enough anymore. Not with the expectations they carry, not with the talent they possess. And that is why the road to 2026 is not just a journey. It is a test of identity, a test of structure, and most importantly, a test of whether Portugal is ready to become a team that does not depend on one name. Because the next chapter of this story will not be written by history. It will be written by how this team plays together. If Portugal's past was built on moments, then their future will be decided by structure, because this team no longer lacks creativity. The real question is how that creativity is organized. In possession, Portugal has the tools to control games. Bruno Fernandes is not just an attacking midfielder. In this team, he is a vertical accelerator. He looks forward before most players even receive the ball. He takes risks early, and that can break defensive lines instantly. But it also creates volatility because vertical play speeds the game up. And when the tempo increases, structure becomes harder to maintain. Bernardo Silva operates at the opposite rhythm. He slows things down, he connects phases, he creates stability between movements. Bernardo is not there to finish attacks quickly. He is there to make sure the attack exists in the first place. And that contrast is both a strength and a challenge, because now Portugal has two different interpretations of control: fast progression and controlled circulation. The question is not which one is better. The question is whether they can coexist. In build-up, Portugal often tries to create central access first, using short passing sequences, pulling opponents out of shape, opening lanes through midfield, but when pressure increases, the structure can stretch. And that is where decisions become critical. Do they continue building or do they go direct? This is where the system still feels undecided, because sometimes the team looks like it wants to dominate possession, and other times it looks ready to attack space immediately. Those are two different identities, and switching between them requires perfect coordination. Now bring Rafael Leão into that structure, and everything changes again. Leão is not a possession player in the traditional sense. He is a transition weapon. He thrives when the game opens up, when defenders are isolated, when space appears behind the line. So Portugal faces a natural contradiction. Their midfield wants control, their wide threat wants chaos, and that contradiction is not necessarily a problem. Some of the best teams in tournament football balance both, but balance requires clear roles and precise timing. If Leão goes early, the midfield must support quickly. If the midfield slows the game, Leão must stay connected. These are small details, but in high-level football, small details decide everything. Then there is the striker role, and this is where the transition becomes most visible. Cristiano Ronaldo still offers elite positioning inside the box. His movement does not depend on pace, it depends on instinct, on timing, on reading space before it opens. But modern systems often demand more from the striker. Pressing, link-up play, constant movement across defensive lines. And this is where Portugal must decide. Do they build around a fixed presence, or do they move toward a more fluid front line? Players like Gonçalo Ramos offer a different profile. More mobility, more pressing intensity, more system compatibility, but less of that guaranteed finishing presence. And this is not a simple upgrade or downgrade. It is a philosophical shift. Defensively, Portugal has the foundation to be solid. Rúben Dias brings organization, he communicates, he controls the defensive line, he understands positioning at a high level. But defensive strength is not just about the back line. It is about the structure in front of it. And this is where Portugal still has questions. When they press high, the shape can become aggressive. Lines move forward, space is open behind, and if the press is broken, the team can be exposed in transition. When they sit deeper, they look more compact, more stable, but they lose some of their ability to control the game. Again, it comes back to identity. Are they a proactive pressing team or a reactive defensive structure? Right now, they show elements of both, but not always at the same time. And this is why their tactical DNA still feels unfinished. Not because the ideas are wrong, but because the connections between those ideas are not always consistent. This is the part people often miss. Tactics are not just about systems on paper. They are about relationships between players, between movements, between decisions. Portugal has the pieces. Bruno's verticality, Bernardo's control, Leão's explosiveness, Dias's organization, Ronaldo's presence. Individually, each role makes sense. Collectively, the question remains, because in tournament football, the difference is not talent, it is clarity under pressure. And right now, Portugal is still searching for the version of themselves that can hold together when the game becomes unpredictable. At this stage of Portugal's evolution, names are no longer enough, because this team is not defined by who plays. It is defined by how they function together. Cristiano Ronaldo is not just a striker. In this team, he is a legacy reference point. What he provides is not constant movement. It is presence inside the box. His instincts remain elite. He does not chase the game. He waits for the moment when the game arrives to him, and when it does, he still knows how to finish. But here's the question. Can a team moving toward fluidity still revolve around a fixed point? Because modern attacking systems often depend on constant rotation, interchanging positions, dragging defenders out of shape, and that requires every forward to participate in movement. Ronaldo offers something different. He offers certainty, but that certainty can also slow the system if not supported correctly. Bruno Fernandes is not just a midfielder. He is the risk engine. Everything about his game pushes forward. His passes break lines, his decisions accelerate attacks. He is constantly looking for the action that changes the game immediately. And that is incredibly valuable, because without players like Bruno, control becomes sterile, but risk comes with consequence. If his passes don't connect, if the timing is off, Portugal can lose structure quickly. Transitions become dangerous, and suddenly the team is defending while unbalanced. So Bruno's role is not just about creativity. It is about timing, when to accelerate and when to hold. Bernardo Silva operates in a completely different emotional space. He is not chasing the final action. He is controlling everything before it. Bernardo is the connector, the player who makes sure the team moves as one unit. He receives under pressure. He keeps the ball. He creates angles. He allows others to move. If Bruno is the spark, Bernardo is the system stabilizer. But here's where the tension appears again, because too much control can slow the game, and too much speed can break it. Portugal needs both. But not at the same time. Rafael Leão is not just a winger. He is disruption, pure, direct, explosive disruption. When he receives the ball in space, the structure disappears. Defenders isolate, lines stretch, the game opens, and this is something Portugal needs, because without unpredictability, even the best systems become readable, but unpredictability is difficult to control. Leão does not always follow the rhythm of the team. He creates his own, and that can disconnect him from the structure if the timing is not perfect. So his role is not just to attack, it is to choose the right moments to break the game. João Félix represents something else entirely. He is not a fixed position player. He operates between lines, finding pockets of space, linking midfield and attack. He is comfortable in ambiguity, but ambiguity can be difficult to structure because systems prefer clarity, defined zones, defined movements. Félix offers creativity in those undefined spaces, but the team must adapt around him. Otherwise, his influence becomes inconsistent. Then there is Gonçalo Ramos, and his role tells you a lot about where Portugal might be heading. He is not built around legacy. He is built for the system. He presses, he runs, he stretches defensive lines. He creates space for others. He may not offer the same finishing aura as Ronaldo, but he offers something else, compatibility. And sometimes in tournament football, compatibility matters more than individual brilliance. Defensively, Rúben is not just a center back. He is the organizer, the reference point of the defensive structure. He controls positioning, he communicates constantly. He ensures that the back line moves together. Without players like Diaz, defensive systems collapse under pressure. With him, they at least have a foundation. Behind that line, Diogo Costa plays another crucial role. He is not just a goalkeeper, he is the last layer of decision making. In modern football, that role goes beyond saving shots. It includes distribution, it includes positioning outside the box, it includes starting attacks, and this is where small details matter again. Because if the goalkeeper is part of build-up, then the entire structure shifts. So when you look at Portugal's key players, the story is not about individuals, it is about interaction. Ronaldo's presence, Bruno's risk, Bernardo's control, Leão's chaos, Félix's fluidity, Ramos' system movement. Diaz's organization, Costa's distribution. Each role makes sense on its own, but football is not played in isolation. The real question is this: do these roles connect into a system, or do they compete for space within it? Because if they connect, Portugal becomes unpredictable in the best possible way. Balanced, dynamic, difficult to stop. But if they collide, the same talent becomes a problem. Disjointed, inconsistent, unstable under pressure. And that is why this team is so fascinating. Because the difference between success and disappointment may not be ability. It may be alignment. Portugal's biggest problem is not talent. It is not depth. It is not even experience. It is clarity, because when you look at this team, everything seems available: control, creativity, directness, structure, individual quality. But these strengths do not always appear at the same time. And that is where the real weakness begins. Not in what they lack, but in what they cannot consistently connect. When the game is under control, Portugal can look composed. The midfield circulates, the structure holds. The team feels balanced. But when the tempo shifts, when the opponent presses aggressively, when transitions become chaotic, that balance can disappear quickly. This is where the system is tested, and this is where Portugal still has questions. Because if Bruno accelerates too early, if Leão breaks forward without support, if the defensive line steps up without coordination, the team stretches. Space is open, and suddenly Portugal is not controlling the game anymore. They are reacting to it, and reacting is dangerous in tournament football, because the best teams force you into mistakes. They do not wait for them. Another issue is decision-making under pressure. Not individual decisions, but collective ones. When to slow the game, when to push forward, when to hold shape, when to take risks. These are not instructions you can fully script. They come from understanding, from repetition, from identity. And this is what Portugal is still building. Because right now there are moments when the team looks like a complete unit. Everything connects. The midfield links with the attack. The defense stays compact. The transitions are controlled. But there are also moments when it breaks. Not dramatically, but subtly. A gap too wide. Pass too early, a run not supported. And at the highest level, those small moments decide everything. So the question for 2026 is not simple. It is layered. Can Portugal define a clear identity? Can they choose how they want to play and commit to it under pressure? Because they have multiple paths. They could become a possession-dominant team, controlling games through structure and patience. They could become a transition-focused side, using Leão's speed and Bruno's verticality to attack quickly. Or they could try to balance both, switching between control and chaos, depending on the moment. Each option is valid, but only if executed with clarity. And this is where tournament football becomes unforgiving, because you do not get time to adjust. You do not get multiple chances to fix mistakes. You either know who you are, or you find out too late that you don't. Portugal has the experience to compete. They have players who have played at the highest level. They understand pressure. They have survived it before. But this generation is different. They are not chasing history. They are trying to redefine it. And that is a much more difficult task. Because creating identity is harder than inheriting one. Cristiano Ronaldo represents everything Portugal has been. A symbol of belief, of ambition, of moments that define tournaments. But 2026 may not be about moments anymore. It may be about systems, about how well the team functions together, about how clearly they understand their roles. And this is where the transition becomes real. Not when Ronaldo leaves, but when the team no longer depends on him to define the game. That moment has not fully arrived yet, but it is coming. And when it does, Portugal will either become something more complete or something more uncertain, because this is the truth about this team. They are close, very close. The pieces are there. The quality is undeniable. The potential is obvious. But potential does not win tournaments. Clarity does. So Portugal approaches the 2026 World Cup. The story is not about whether they can compete. They can. The story is about whether they can become a team that understands itself. Under pressure, under chaos, under expectation. Because if they do, they could be one of the most balanced teams in the tournament. But if they don't, they risk becoming another talented squad that never fully connected. And that is why Portugal's 2026 story is not predictable. It is not guaranteed. It is not defined. It is still being written, and the ending will depend on one thing. Not who they have, but who they decide to become.